bond,
Da habe ich gleich mit ihr einen
a
guten
truly
Kontakt
heartfelt
aufgenommen.
connection.
Die war mir, wissen Sie, sagt zum Herzen. Ich kann von heute
I
nicht
can't
mehr
say it was love at first sight. I didn't know what love was back then.
Aber ich
But
habe
right
sofort
away,
mit
we
ihr
found a
zusammen
mutual
eine
bond.
gemeinsame Sprache gefunden.
I know that my grandparents, when they were in Bergen, they didn't have nothing except themselves. And my grandmother always told me she had to make like a nest to start over, to feel she has something to hold.
Slowly, a modest daily routine developed in the DP camp. People began to establish themselves within the community. The end of the war brought a steady influx of more people, especially Jewish survivors from the eastern concentration camps. In order to make waiting for a new homeland bearable, the inhabitants tried to create a sense of communal living.
It's a remarkable story, very remarkable story. It's a miraculous story that right after the liberation, the survivors of the concentration camp showed so much vitality and such a drang to life and creativity. It's unbelievable that within a short time they created a self-government in this so-called displaced persons camp, which was housed in the former German barracks, only about 1.5 kilometers away from the mass graves.
Sam Bloch arrived shortly after the liberation on a transport from Poland. After years of suppression, he wanted to take part in the decision-making process and was elected to the Jewish Committee at only 21, the youngest member. The board represented the interests of Jewish survivors very actively, along with its assertive leader, Josef Rosensaft.
Bergen-Belsen developed into a flourishing, normal community. When you ask about normal people, would wake up in the morning, would have breakfast, would walk in the streets, would read the papers, would meet, would chat, would talk. Then there were all kinds of engagements. Young children went to school.
You had to be placed according to the age. You couldn't go to elementary school if you were high school age. And it was like a normal school, you know, with teachers and we did our homework. We had no textbooks. Everything was written by hand, and then you had to learn from this.
Lily Shaban survived persecution and war by hiding with her parents in Poland. Without a home or means, they reached the camp when Lily was 15.
The life was very interesting, you know. We made new friends. We tried to tell each other our experiences. And believe it or not, our friendships with those children at that time last till today. Till today.
The first school classes in years. The backlog was enormous, but the students were eager and the teachers ambitious. In 1 year, they covered the content of 3 years. After just 3 years, Lily graduated with honors, allowing her to study dental medicine. The Jewish Committee put a lot of effort into the vocational training of the young generation, trying to prepare them for a life of their own. The idea was that learning a solid trade offered the best starting conditions, and the young students responded diligently.
There was a real need for all of that, as if being able to learn again was proof of being alive, being human again. That's why all of the DP camp's extraordinary activities were established so quickly.
Haben eben diese erstaunlichen Aktivitäten im DP Camp auch relativ schnell stattgefunden.
The longing for dearly missed Jewish rituals and festivities, for traditions and music, was equally strong.
In September we celebrated Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. They brought a cantor, I don't know from where, and we prayed a special Yom Kippur evening prayer. It's more like a song, a beautiful prayer. I will never forget this moment. It was so touching. The walls were shaking. It was so wonderful. We hadn't heard these words for years. I come from a very religious home, very religious. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. In Auschwitz, they told us, today they brought 300 rabbis from Hungary, and they burned them all. The sky was red from the flames. And I stood there as a young girl and asked, God, where are you? Where are you? Every day they burn children, women, men, young ones, older ones. But where are you? So I lost my faith. We all need to believe in something. But I couldn't believe the way I once did anymore.
On the first anniversary of the liberation, the Jewish Committee inaugurated a memorial for the victims of the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. For years to come, this day would serve as a shameful reminder to the Allies and the world. The survivors were forced to settle around Bergen-Belsen in a transit camp right next to the mass graves.
Mit dem Namen des Konzentrationslagers konnte man
The concentration camp's name was a powerful moral leverage in arguing for an immigration from Bergen-Belsen to Palestine. And the survivors didn't want to give up this moral pressure.
Dieses Druckmittel, wenn man so will, dieses moralische Druckmittel wollten sich die Überlebenden eben auch nicht nehmen lassen.
Conflicts arose quickly. The resolute work of the Jewish Committee constantly challenged the British authorities. Against their will, the committee declared a purely Jewish DP camp, keeping the dunning name Bergen-Belsen. Adamantly, the committee fought for the interests of the survivors.
We don't want people, whether Germans or not Germans, or visitors from all over the world, to look at the Jews only as a victim who is soaked in blood and being buried alive. We should look at people who have a past, who have a culture, who have a tradition, and who are very creative, could be very creative. We are very proud of our younger generation.
My grandparents' experiences as Holocaust survivors is something that was always talked about at every table and every family gathering, and it's something that really has shaped our family in terms of our family values and also in terms of the way that we relate to one another.
Their pride is reflected in these old photographs. The people's enthusiasm and the committee's political willpower soon made Bergen-Belsen the most influential and biggest Jewish post-war DP camp in Germany. a center of sports competition, with its own police unit keeping order. Numerous acting groups performed classic and Yiddish theater, as well as processing the concentration camp experiences on stage. A real shtetl was being created, the first Jewish community in Lower Saxony after the war. Just a few weeks after its inception, the first wedding was celebrated.
Familie war natürlich sowas wie ein Rettungsanker.
Family was like a lifesaver. Almost all of them were totally alone. Their relatives murdered, old communities in their home countries wiped off the face of the earth. How are you going to survive if you are all by yourself?
Und ganz alleine, wie will man ganz alleine als Mensch überleben?
Wir waren so leer. Wir waren so einsam.
We were so empty inside, so lonely. There was such a strong need for closeness, for family, for being together with someone. That was terribly important. I was so jealous whenever somebody was reunited with a brother or a sister. I was all by myself in the world. What was I going to do? When you're together, everything's different. You're a family.
Joseph and Tony got married in September 1945. They were just 19 years old.
My
friends kept saying, "Are you mad? Why do you want to get married so soon?" But I knew my goal. I said, I have no one left. If I want to stay alive, I have to give my life some meaning. Or what else would have been the point of surviving? You see, we're filled with reproach and guilt. Why did I stay alive? There had to be a sense of meaning.
Warum bin ich beim Leben geblieben? Dann muss es doch irgendeinen Sinn im Leben geben.
A curtain became the veil, handed down from bride to bride. Poverty required creativity. Neighbors, friends, colleagues, they all chipped in for the nuptials.
Wenn du heiratest, ich bin ein Konditor, ich werde dir machen Torte.
One man said, "When you get married, I will make you a cake. I'm a pastry cook." "What will you make a cake with?" I asked. We had no eggs, just a little sugar, but there were biscuits. And with these and some butter, he made a biscuit cake. A wonderful cake.
Herrliche Torte.
More than 1,000 couples tied the knot within the camp's first year. The results were cheerfully seen the following year. Up to 3 births per day were not unusual. Nurses taught baby care. The DP Camp Bergen-Belsen became the community with Germany's highest birth rate in 1946. But not only was childcare perfectly organized. As soon as the post-war camp was up and running, international and Jewish aid organizations like UNRWA and Joint came in, delivering much-needed relief supplies like clothing and food. In fact, the humanitarian aid led to a modest economic stability, opening a new source of income: trade.
After a while, the camp was being supplied better than much of the German population, and thanks to various aid organizations, the survivors suddenly had something to barter with. Popular luxury items like coffee and other goods could be swapped for whatever the local population had managed to save during the war.
Business was thriving. And one special deal soon connected the camp with the world.